Antoni Kępiński was a distinguished psychiatrist and professor of psychiatry at the Jagiellonian University in Krakow, Poland. His work is characterized by a humanistic approach, emphasizing the subjective experience of patients and the importance of empathy in psychiatric practice. Neurotic anxiety. In psychiatric practice, anxiety is a primary concern and a fundamental component of nearly all clinical syndromes. It's frequently accompanied by other psychopathological symptoms. Thus, reducing or eliminating anxiety often leads to the disappearance of other symptoms, such as delusions or hallucinations. To be an effective psychiatrist in practice means being able to alleviate the anxiety of one's patient. Anxiety. In mental disorders, anxiety manifests in various forms with varying intensity. The most well-known type is neurotic anxiety. There is likely no person who has not experienced this type of anxiety, at least briefly. Indefinite anxiety. The most common form of neurotic anxiety is indefinite anxiety. This type of anxiety was accurately described in the ancient medical workbook of the Yellow Emperor as an uneasy tension akin to illness. Indefinite neurotic anxiety involves a sensation of inner tension felt in the muscles, internal organs, and psyche. In mild intensity, this tension can be beneficial, stimulating activity and greater mental and physical effort. However, in greater intensity, it becomes paralyzing. The person becomes unable to think, make decisions, and feel shattered, physically and mentally in pain. It is indeed, as the ancient Chinese text aptly described, a state similar to illness. The anxiety is objectless. We do not know what we fear. We do not know what troubles us. Yet something does. We wish to escape the situation we find ourselves in, to breathe freely, but we do not know the nature of this malady. Therefore, the fundamental characteristic of indefinite anxiety is unawareness. Something threatens us, but we do not know what. This anxiety involves an anticipation of the future. We do not know what it will bring. In milder intensity, such anxiety forces us to take action, to face the future. In greater intensity, the person lacks the courage to move forward, retreats, and becomes enclosed in the present, which is filled with anxiety. The vicious circle closes. The inability to move forward, to escape the uneasy time, increases anxiety and makes this time even more unbearable, while simultaneously paralyzing the courage needed to face the future. The future. The future is always an unknown time. We do not know what may befall us. Hence, there is always an element of anxiety when confronting the future. Indefinite anxiety is thus the fear of the unknown. It makes us aware that to live, we must constantly strive towards an unknown future and transform it into a known past. That this transformation of the unknown into the known, of the future into the past, requires effort and courage. Sometimes a person lacks the strength, and sometimes the situation is too difficult. Then the person fears the future, wants to retreat into the past, typical of neurotic regression to earlier developmental stages, or at least remain in the present, which is impossible because life involves expansion into the future. It cannot be halted even for a moment. Thus, the problem of indefinite anxiety is also an issue of evolution, a continuous conquest of the future, reaching for what is still unknown and uncertain. As Professor Roman Ingarden once said, time can be a constructor, but it can also be a destructor when we have the courage to penetrate the darkness of the future and illuminate it with our own action plan, then it is constructive. We model the future, we are its creators. Such time brings us joy rather than fear, is not our enemy but our friend. However, when we stand helpless before the darkness of the unknown, when the future terrifies us, when we want to flee from it, when the darkness reveals monsters of death and disaster, when it is hostile time, destructive time, which ruthlessly devours and destroys us, the category of the future. The category of the future is fundamental component of all self-regulating systems, both technical and biological. The future, in the form of a specific goal, is embedded in the system. This is known as programming. Through feedback, the system is informed about the program being executed, and based on this information, the plan can be modified. Programming is like the system's subjective future, which never fully realizes. To achieve its plan, the system must overcome various environmental resistances and internal disorder. Hence, there is always a discrepancy between what is planned and what is executed. Thus, alongside the subjective future, there is an objective future, not just the plan, but what actually happens. This potential, but an unavoidable, discrepancy. This potential but unavoidable discrepancy between the subjective future, the plan, and the objective future, its realization, is the source of constant internal tension in living organisms. Tension that is a feature of life. There is constant struggle between the subjective and objective future, between what should happen from the organism's point of view and what actually happens. This is a dramatic struggle, as many biological plans are not realized. Many are wasted during life, many perish at its inception. Many perish as at its inception. This internal tension forces vigilance, fighting with the environment, sticking to the set goal, and continuously seeking the new ways to achieve it. To some extent, it's the motor of evolution, assuming that evolution is not only a passive process, but also an active one, requiring both individual and collective effort from living beings. In humans, the source of anxiety is not only the discrepancy between the subjective and objective future, but also the fact that both types of future are unknown. We do not know our subjective future, our programming or fate, and we do not know the objective future. The intrusion into the future has always fascinated humans, and divinatory abilities have usually been valued. The unknown future that lies within us and the unknown future of the world around us create an atmosphere of anxiety and tension. This atmosphere is a necessary backdrop for the effort of life. We must overcome our own anxiety and face the future, realizing ourselves without knowing exactly what we are realizing, because we do not know our plan or our future. Probability calculation. Indefinite anxiety is thus an experience related to the very fact of existence and occurs in every person, especially in situations where one must abandon usual life patterns and seek a new path. Neurotic anxiety, that is much more intense and more deeply ingrained, usually occurs when a person feels a disintegration of their subjective or objective future, or, as often happens, both together. We do not know our subjective and objective future, but a certain order exists within us. But a certain order existing within us projects into it, and thus the future is not entirely unfamiliar to us. We enter a partially known terrain because it contains a projection of our own order. We do not know what tomorrow will bring. It is unknown to us both in its subjective aspect, i.e., what we will be like tomorrow, and in its objective aspect, what the surrounding world will be like tomorrow. However, we know that we will get up in the morning, as we did today, that we will go to work, that we will have specific tasks. We know that the sun will shine tomorrow, that trams will run, electric lights, water supply and sewage systems will operate, etc. In short, we will enter a certain order and bring some order to the next day. Thus, anxiety about the unknown is reduced by belief in a specific course of events, both personal and in the surrounding world. We enter the future with a certain probability calculation that it will unfold in a specific way. But it can happen that our calculation fails, that in the morning we do not feel able to get out of bed. There could be a failure in transportation, electricity, gas, or water supply. We might have an accident on the street and end up in hospital bed instead of at work, etc. However, these are events with a rather low probability coefficient. When projecting the future, we usually do not take them into account. Thus, the future appears more certain to us. We step into it as if onto solid ground, which of course is often an illusion. These expectations. In neurosis, a certainty is lost. The person becomes uncertain about themselves and the surrounding world. They do not know what will happen to them tomorrow and what the next day will bring. The ground shifts beneath their feet. The person feels trapped in a dead-end street because they no longer have the courage to project themselves into the future. Various causes can lead to the loss of faith in the future, this power of anticipation. They may lie outside in the person's external environment. The situation in the surrounding world is too complicated to predict anything. Or within the person, they are unable to project their order into the future because this order has become disordered. The future is chaotic. The future is chaotic and uncertain because chaos and uncertainty reside within the person. Neurotic anxiety is therefore not a new quality. It exists in a mild form in each of us and is associated with the anticipation of the future. In neurosis, its intensity and degree of fixation increase. The state of internal tension, typical of indefinite anxiety, is linked to the mobilization of the autonomic endocrine system, a mobilization needed to conquer the future. This mobilization is disproportionately large in neurosis compared to the actual energetic needs of the organism. Its magnitude is not shaped proportionally to the current situation, but to the intensity of the anxiety. This connection has the character of positive feedback, a vicious circle. The greater the anxiety tension, the greater the autonomic endocrine mobilization. The greater the mobilization, the greater the anxiety tension. Projecting into the future. Indefinite neurotic anxiety brings us to the fundamental issue of human life, namely, the ability of humans to project themselves into the future. Humans, like all living beings, must constantly contend with their future. This phenomenon is particularly acute because it is partly conscious. A person must have the courage to leap into the unknown time-space, facilitated by the fact that the past and present are somewhat ordered, and thus a certain order can be projected into the future. Anxiety occurs when this leap is difficult, when a person hesitates, and as if standing before a chasm, unable to retreat or move forward. This chasm, the future, yawns menacingly. Its darkness hides unknown dangers, and this causes intense tension. Thus, indefinite anxiety is an emotion deeply rooted in human nature, often surfacing in individuals experiencing stress, significant life changes, or facing the unknown. Its management involves creating a sense of predictability and order in life, fostering courage and resilience, and sometimes professional therapeutic intervention to help individuals overcome paralyzing fear and regain control over their lives.